Hello friends, in today's video I will discuss how Protestantism developed in England. At the same time, I will also refer to the various different views within the Protestant Church in England and how it gave birth to different sects of Protestantism like Puritans, dissenters, etc. Let's begin our discussion. We all know that Christianity is the largest religion in the world. It is mainly split into three large branches: the Catholic Church, the Eastern Orthodox Church, and the Protestant Church. The Protestant Church is the youngest of these, resulting from the Reformation movement of 1517. In England and Wales, Protestantism was definitively established in the 1530s when Henry VIII separated the Church of England from Rome. Before I proceed further, I want to ask a question. The question is, what is the meaning of the word Catholic? Your options are pure, broad minded, followers of Christ, children of God. I will tell the answer at the end of the lesson. Now let's briefly discuss how and why Protestant movement started. From the beginning of 1500, some Roman Catholics began to disagree with their church. At first, they wanted only to change or reform parts of the church. Their movement became known as the Reformation. But the leaders of Roman Catholicism strongly opposed such changes. Soon, some people broke away to form new churches. Members of the new churches became known as Protestants. Martin Luther is considered to be the founder of the Protestant faith. However, there are many different branches of Protestantism, some of which differ sharply from Luther's theology. The Protestant Reformation began in Wittenberg, Germany, on 31st October in 1517, when Martin Luther, a teacher and a monk, published a document he called Disputation on the Power of Indulgences, or 95 Theses. The document was a series of 95 ideas about Christianity that he invited people to debate with him. Luther's statements challenged the Catholic Church's role as an intermediary, a mediator between people and God, specifically when it came to the indulgence system. Indulgence allowed people to purchase a certificate of pardon for the punishment of their sins. Luther argued against the practice of buying or earning forgiveness, believing instead that salvation is a gift God gives to those who have faith. Although many Protestant churches have different beliefs, all Protestants reject Roman Catholicism and the power of its leader, the Pope. Protestants argued that individual believers should be less dependent on the Catholic Church and its people and priests for spiritual guidance and salvation. Instead, Protestants believed that getting to heaven requires only faith in God, not any specific actions. People should be independent in their relationship with God. They should read the Bible for spiritual wisdom. England became a Protestant country during the reign of Henry VIII. The reason was not religious but political. For most of his adult life, Henry was a devout Catholic. He attended daily Mass and went to Catholic pilgrimages to holy sites. Henry was shocked and angered by Martin Luther's movement in Germany. He wrote a book called The Defense of the Seven Sacraments, which was a passionate defense of the key aspects of Catholicism. Henry was given a special title of Fide Defensor, or Defender of the Faith, by the Pope. The problem started when Henry VIII requested the Pope an annulment, that is, termination of marriage from his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Catherine was Henry VIII's brother's widow. The couple needed a special dispensation, that is, exemption from the Pope, in order to marry. This was granted, but she was only able to bear him a daughter, Mary Tudor. Henry wanted a boy to ensure the continuation of the Tudor dynasty in England. Therefore, he asked Pope Clement VII to annul his marriage to Catherine on the ground that the marriage contradicted the biblical prohibition against a man marrying his brother's widow. Pope Clement VII tried to keep Henry happy and allowed Henry to have his marriage put on trial in England. The Pope sent a representative called Cardinal Campeggio to England. Henry and Catherine gave evidence. Catherine wanted to remain married to Henry. After months of debate and delay, the court did not grant Henry his annulment. Henry VIII abolished the authority of the Pope over the Church of England and set up the independent Church of England with the King as the supreme head of the Church. The spiritual head was Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer, who married Henry to Anne Boleyn. The Pope could not give Henry an annulment for several reasons. First, one of Henry's reasons for seeking a divorce was that he thought he had sinned by marrying his brother's widow. However, the biblical book of Deuteronomy states that a man should marry his brother's widow. Second, if the Pope declared Henry's marriage invalid, he would first have to go against the papal dispensation, that is, special consideration of a previous Pope, who had allowed Catherine and Henry to marry in the first place. Third, Catherine was the daughter of a King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain. They were the wealthiest and most powerful monarchs in Europe at that time, and granting Henry an annulment would have been a major insult to the Catholic Church's most important patron. Thus, the king did not establish this Anglican Church in England as a result of religious differences with Catholicism. His motives were mainly political, and he persecuted radical Protestants who threatened his new church. England remained much the same even with the new state religion. The Church of England that King Henry established was a sort of hybrid church that combined some of Catholic doctrine and some Protestant ideals. It is sometimes seen as being the middle way between Roman Catholicism and Protestantism. Its doctrines and practices were at first very similar to those of the Catholic Church. The English Church kept the early Catholic ministry of bishops, priests, and deacons, as well as most of the doctrine and ritual. The king made two visible differences to show his authority over the new church. Priests and monks were now allowed to marry, and monasteries and any valuables inside the monasteries were seen to belong to the king to use as he wished. The real shift towards Protestantism came during the reign of Henry's son, Edward VI. Under the influence of reformers like Thomas Cranmer, the Church of England underwent radical changes, including the introduction of the Book of Common Prayer, the rejection of the real presence in the Eucharist, and the suppression of Catholic practices. He was more devout in his faith, and persecution of Protestant subjects ceased. Under his sister Queen Mary I, also known as Bloody Mary, briefly restored Catholicism in England, and Protestants were persecuted once again. She was raised as a Catholic and saw it as her duty to purge the evil of Protestantism from her country, but her reign was short-lived. When Elizabeth I ascended the throne, she sought to find a middle ground with her religious settlement, which established the Church of England's independence from the papacy, that is, from the authority of Pope, and solidified the Protestant character of English Church. Some English citizens did not believe Queen Elizabeth's effort to restore England to Protestantism went far enough. These citizens fell into two groups, both labeled Puritans by their opponents. The first group, known as separatists, believed the Church of England was so corrupt that their only choice was to leave England. separate from the church and start a new church. They called this the English Separatist Church. Around 1607 or 1609, some of the separatists tried to start the new lives they imagined in Holland, in the Netherlands. By 1620, members of the English Separatist Church set out for New England and eventually landed near Plymouth, Massachusetts, in USA. They in time become known as Pilgrims. The other group of English citizens who did not believe Queen Elizabeth's reform efforts were called non-separatists. Over time, the term Puritan would become synonymous with the non-separatist. They did not seek to leave the Church of England. They wanted only to reform it by eliminating the remnants of Catholicism that remained. In terms of theology, most of them were Calvinists. Some Puritans saw emigrating to New England as their best chance at true reform of the church and freedom to worship as they chose. In 1630, a decade after the Pilgrims embarked on a similar journey for similar reasons, the first Puritans traveled to the New World in America and established the Massachusetts Bay colony in Boston, Massachusetts. The Puritan movement in England has a huge impact on the publication of Bible in English language. In Catholic England, the only Bible authorized for use was written in Latin Vulgate, a translation of proper Latin considered holy by the Roman Catholic Church. As a result, only clergy had access to copies of the Bible. Ordinary citizens who did not knew how to read Latin were dependent on their local priests for the reading of scriptures because they could not read the text for themselves. In the 14th century, John Wycliffe translated the whole Bible into the English language and made the Bible available to all English speaking people, regardless of their wealth or social standing. Later, the invention of the printing press made it easier for reformers to share copies of the new Bible. In 1526, William Tyndale published the first complete Bible in print. Once the common people had access to the Bible, many left the Catholic Church and joined the Protestant Church. Now let's go back to the question. Here the correct answer is option B, broad-minded, free from prejudices or attachments. That's all for today. Thank you for listening.